I want to talk to a friend of mine who's just got a new book out.
Okay.
David McKenas.
You were telling me about it.
I'm really excited about this book called Shocked, Life or Death at 35,000 Feet. I'm excited about this. Dr. David McKenas, are you there?
I'm here, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us here on American Ground Radio. Now, you were in charge of medical operations for American Airlines for all of their flights. What was your official title with them?
It was corporate medical director for the airline.
This is a neat story because there was a time when we were flying across the United States of America, and if you had a heart attack, what were your odds of survival before putting defibrillators on airplanes? What was your odds of survival, do you think, if you had a heart attack on an airplane?
Well, the odds of survival of a heart attack are higher than what's known as this lethal condition called sudden cardiac arrest, where the heart completely stops. The odds of survival for that event, which was happening 60 times a year, was zero, unless we put these life-saving devices on board, which we did in 1998.
And you were instrumental in getting the defibrillators put on board. You put the first defibrillator on an airplane in the United States of America.
Correct. We did that for American Airlines, and it was over 600 airplanes that we did that for, and we trained 25,000 flight attendants to use them. It was unheard of at the time. Flight attendants were not medical people, but they were the first people on the scene. And the remarkable save, the very first save that occurred, was in 1998, just 2 days after the defibrillator was placed on the airplane, to Mr. Robert Giggy.
Yeah, that's the neat story. And you talk about that in your book, about the very first patient, the very first passenger whose life was saved. He was gone, right? His heart had stopped.
Yes, he was dead.
And you guys brought him back. Your flight crew brought him back using the defibrillator that you helped put on that plane.
Correct. And it's a remarkable story. The flight attendant that responded was literally suicidal that day, but yet she took the call to take the flight. And while she was doing the resuscitation with an onboard paramedic, claimed to hear a voice just telling her not to do it, that she had great things ahead of her. And she went on to mission work after Mr. Giggy was saved. So the book, that's the theme throughout the book, but the rest of the book tells what's below the iceberg, the entire story of how that defibrillator got on that plane just 2 days prior to that fateful use.
Doctor, what was the genesis of this idea? I mean, other than wanting to save lives, what was it that actually kicked it off?
Well, I was a geek, basically, that came from Harvard School of Public Health and just became corporate medical director, and I loved to look at data. I looked at the data and saw that we were losing about 60 customers a year to this condition, sudden cardiac arrest. And while I had my CEO down to his skivvies, basically, for his executive physical, I told him, sir, and this was Mr. Robert Crandall, it's sort of a rough and tumble CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if we can train 25,000 flight attendants and put this box on board, we can probably save a good number of these people. And he basically said yes. And the greatest miracle of all, Stephen, was that I told the executive committee of American Airlines that there was no cost benefit to put these on board. It was just the right thing to do, and they did it. It was remarkable.
And I love that you go into the story, not only what happened to the gentleman whose life was saved, but also the flight attendant who was involved. This was something that really did change lives, not just save them.
Right. The name of the book, Shocked, goes to many levels. Not only was Mr. Giggy brought back to life, but this flight attendant remorphed into a new individual. She dropped her suicidal thoughts.
David, I love that. I got to cut you off right there. I'm so sorry. Life or Shocked,
no problem.
Life or Death at 35,000 feet. You got to pick that book up. It is an amazing story.
Wow.
David McKenas, thank you so much for joining us.